and welcome to Three Men in a Shed.
We're three men, and we're in a shed.
In today's battle, Chris rolls some dice, whilst Martin drinks wine. Rome, turn 1. Chris uses the divisional order on his central division and moves them into a very commanding position in the middle of the board. He then uses another divisional order to move his right flank division up onto the ridgeline of the hill overlooking the valley. He moves both the velites and the cavalry of the left-hand division forwards, but fails an order roll, so cannot move the rest of his left-hand division. He forgets the drilled special rule, which would have allowed him to move these troops forward after a failed order test. But never mind. Carthage, turn 1. Martin has his right flank starting on the wrong side of the small stream, so treating it as a linear obstacle, he needs one whole additional order to cross over. Sadly, he fails to motivate his men enough to cross the stream, but does manage to move that division up to the river bank. He moves the slingers and the Numidian archers in the centre to get some shots into the Roman central division, with his Italian allied infantry and cavalry following up in support of the skirmishers. On his left flank, he cautiously moves the Numidian light cavalry and the Balearic slingers forward, followed by the Gallic warband. In the shooting phase, his archers and slingers failed to put any wounds on the Roman central division.
So, right. Chris,
yeah.
The end of turn 1, how's it going?
Going all right so far. Early days yet. I wanted to move forward a little bit cautiously and react to what the Carthaginians were going to be doing, but my centre division moved forward a little more aggressively than I thought they were. What can I say? They're just keen for the fight. My right division moved up to the ridge of the hill. They're keeping an eye on what's going on the Carthaginians' left flank. The bit disappointed that my left flank, the main infantry, didn't get to advance, so they're stuck a little bit far behind.
But they fouled their role, did they?
They did.
Right.
So the cavalry and the velites got to move forward, leaving their more heavily armoured brethren behind. But we've still got some time yet to close that gap between the division.
So, tell us, how's your turn 1 been?
Well, so far, I'd say the biggest surprise is how quickly your troops are getting across the field. You look at a 15mm ranked up game, and your first assumption is that it's going to be 2 or 3 turns of manoeuvring and wheeling and counter manoeuvring. Absolutely not. The Romans are halfway across the field. I've had to react to that pretty strongly. Really enjoying it. Second point, the mechanics are really simple, really intuitive. So I'm kind of enjoying how easy it is to get to grips with the force, what I need to do, where things need to go. It seems to work really nicely. Shooting is a lot less devastating than I was hoping, but maybe the slingers are going to sort that out in turns 2 to 3.
Rome, turn 2. Chris moves his central velites up to get into javelin range, then orders his central maniple to wheel around to face the Carthaginian cavalry. He does this with an amazing roll of double ones on his order roll.
Come on! Yes.
Chris then tries to move the velites from his right division up into range, but only gets one move, so just moves 6 inches forwards. He then fails to move his right maniple after he fails his order roll. He then orders the left flank velites and cavalry to advance together up to the left-hand woods. He then fails yet again to move his left maniple up. In the shooting phase, Chris shoots with his central velites into the Carthaginian light infantry, inflicting 1 hit. They roll to save, but don't save it, taking 1 hit and first blood of the game. Carthage, turn 2. Martin tries to move a unit of Italian allied infantry across the river, but he fails his order roll, which means the rest of that division is going nowhere this turn. Martin then moves his medium cavalry in the centre forwards to get into javelin range. He then orders his Spanish Scutari and the Phoenicians to charge the enemy to their front. Chris chooses to evade with his skirmishers, but because Martin said charge the enemy to the front, he is able to continue his charge and hit the maniple in the middle. Martin then moves his Numidian archers and his Ligurian light infantry to get into shooting range. On his left flank, he moves the entire division forwards. In the shooting phase, the Ligurian light infantry throw their javelins into the Roman velites on the left. They hit 3 times, with one of the hits rolling a 6. The Roman velites then have to make 3 morale saves. Failing each of those, they also have to take a break test because Martin rolled a 6 when he was rolling to hit. Chris takes his break test and rolls a 6. We make a bit of a mistake at this point. Chris should have treated them as just infantry because velites are technically light infantry. But we use the skirmishers line off of the break test table and he retreats disordered. Martin then uses his Gallic cavalry to loose their javelins into the centre maniple. He hits once, Chris fails his 4-up save and takes a wound. Martin then shoots with his Numidian archers but whiffs the roll. He also manages to whiff his roll when the Balearic slingers shoot, even with their reroll as they have the marksman rule. In the hand-to-hand combat part of the turn, we see Martin Scutari, backed up by Libyan heavy infantry and support, fighting against Chris's Principes, backed up by Triarii, also in support. They both managed to inflict 4 wounds on each other, which would normally be a drawn combat. But because 4 wounds is enough to put a shaken marker down on Chris's Principes, he must take a break test. He takes the break test, rolling only a 4, and because he's shaken, that unit of Principe is broken. Martin is then given an option whether he would like to do a sweep and advance because he destroyed the Principe in combat. He chooses to do this and immediately gets up to 2 moves into his front quarter. He does this and moves into contact with the Triarii. He then fights another round of combat, but this time the dice gods are favouring Rome and it is the Carthaginians that are sent back retreating.
Right, so turn 2 has just occurred. Really engaged in this game so far. Absolutely engaged. So essentially my division over here, including my elephants, has decided to do nothing, which has caused me a bit of a problem. So I've had to sort of split my middle division a little bit, which has meant my leaders had to have some very, very precise positioning. But these lads with javelins have driven back some of Chris's advancing force. I've eradicated 1 unit of Romans and managed to do some damage to another. Yeah, all in all, fantastic stuff. So I feel like I'm breaking through in the centre, which was the plan. It's a lot easier to then fight 2 small armies. The longer that his infantry just sit over there, the easier life gets for me.
Right, so Chris, turn 2. How did that go for you?
Well, we've still got that whole the whole heavy infantry division on the left flank that has stood there since the start of the game. They've watched their velites get pushed back and disordered by javelins from the enemy. In the centre, we had a bit of a mini disaster with the Carthage breaking into the Principes and breaking them. But the Triari, true to form, managed to fend them off.
Rome, turn 3. Chris orders his velites in the centre to move up through the middle of the maniple to reform a screen in front of the troops. He then orders the rest of that division to move back slightly. Chris then tries to move his right-hand velites, but fails his order roll, so his entire right-hand division is going to stay on that hill for another turn. Turning his attention to the left-hand flank division, he moves the cavalry, but under initiative. Now we know that we've made a mistake here, and initiative moves should be done before all order rolls are done. He then moves the rest of the left-hand division to move towards the centre to plug the gap.
At last!
Hey!
In his shooting phase, Chris shoots with his central velites into the Spanish Guattari, inflicting 2 hits. The Spaniards don't make any saves and have to take another break test, but they roll a 10 and they're not going anywhere. Carthage, turn 3. Martin orders his Gallic cavalry to charge the enemy to its front, with support from the Numidian cavalry. Chris evades with his velites, clearing the path for Martin's cavalry to hit the central maniple. Martin then moves his Ligurian light infantry into the woods by the side of the road. The archers then move into the gap between the small hut and the central Carthaginians. He then orders the Libyans in the middle to charge into the central maniple. He first has to check, because they're passing through his friendly unit, whether they'll become disordered or not. He rolls for both units, and fortunately the Libyans don't become disordered, so they charge in.
Have you got an air fryer, Chris?
No.
Aren't they the best?
During the revolution.
Just get on board.
We're on our second one. It's like we were early adopters.
Well, we didn't get the ninja one, right? Because
No, we
ninja
didn't. They're overpriced.
so expensive. So we got a tower one, but it's 2 drawers.
Yeah, that's what we got. We had an original 1 drawer, and now we've gone over to a double drawer. Yeah.
We've probably got, if not the same, basically the same.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I've eaten air fried stuff and it is good. Chips are nice, oven chips are nice.
Yeah.
And you've never said that before.
No, you've never said
You've never put
they're a
those
fine
words
oven chip.
You've always been like, that one's mildly soggy. Like, you know.
In the shooting phase, Martin first fires with his Ligurian light infantry and targets Chris's velites on the left-hand flank. Chris makes his saves, saving one of them, but unfortunately the other one he doesn't save, and is forced to retreat in good order. Martin then used his centrally placed archers to fire into Chris's hastati in the middle on the road. He does 2 hits, one of which is a 6. Chris passes both of his saves, but has to make another break test because Martin just keeps rolling 6s. Martin's Numidian light cavalry on the right hand side then fires into Chris's right hand velites, inflicting 2 hits, and yet again Martin rolls a 6, so Chris will have to make yet another break test. Chris fails to roll any saves and takes 2 wounds. In the break test, Chris rolls a 10. They're absolutely loving it. Martin then targets Chris's light cavalry on the extreme right with his Balearic slingers. He rolls the hit, inflicting 1 hit. Chris fails his roll to save and they take 1 wound. In the combat phase, Martin starts with his central Libyans that have, as we now know, incorrectly charged the central mana pool. Martin rolls his 7 dice, but needing 4s to hit because the long spears on the Triarii will cancel his charge bonus. The Triarii end up winning this combat, but only by 1, so Martin's forced to make a break test, but he rolls high enough to hold his ground without any penalty. Martin then turns his attention to the cavalry charge that he did onto the same mana pool. He rolls and inflicts 5 hits, where Chris inflicts 3 hits in return. Chris manages to save all but 2, so 2 wounds go through, and Martin saves 1, so also 2 wounds go through, making it a drawn combat. However, Chris's unit already had some wounds on it, so the 2 wounds that go through are enough to shake that unit, so he has to take a break test. Chris makes his break test and he rolls an 8, which is hold your ground without any penalty.
Alright, so this turn, not so bad. His right flank is frightened of getting their sandals wet, so they're not crossing that river. That's put them at a bit of a disadvantage. Just looking over at the table, the centre's looking a bit better now. Finally, I got that those heavy infantry, my legionaries, to march up and support the centre. So from my left flank up into the centre, which has been good. I just need to hold down that right flank because I am a bit concerned about all those barbarians coming towards me. They hit pretty hard.
So the centre line's still doing rather well. Really enjoyed turn 3. Broken quite a few more Romans, shaken them up. Everything's going marvellously over there. I'm in a strong position over on the left flank as well, ready for a counter charge, suckering them down off the hill. On the right flank, however, I've been defeated by this very small MDF river, which my entire division refuses to cross. So these war elephants look great, doing nothing. All these lads look great, doing nothing. These guys, who are those guys? They're not coming to the party, don't worry about it.
Rome, turn 4. Chris moves his velites in the centre and on the right hand side back a little bit just to make some space. He does this using initiative moves. He then orders his light cavalry on the right hand side to charge into Martin's Numidian cavalry, but he fails his order roll. Shifting his attention to the left hand side, he orders his Sestati to charge into the Libyans under initiative. I know, we did it again. Chris then orders his light cavalry on the far left to charge the Ligurian light infantry that are holed up in the woods. They make a little bit of a mistake here. Light cavalry can ignore the penalties when you're trying to work out what your order roll should be. So he should have actually made it into contact, having rolled high enough to get 3 moves. In Chris's shooting phase, his velites fire on the Ligurians in the woods, but they miss. The light cavalry on the right shoot into the Numidian cavalry. They hit twice, one of them is a 6. Martin saves 1, takes 1 wound, rolls his break test, and is forced to retreat disordered. Moving on to the close combat phase. Now this gets a bit messy, unfortunately. We do make a couple of mistakes, primarily around sweeping advances and what units Chris could have swept into and what units he should have probably gone into if he'd chosen to do a sweeping advance. It all gets a bit messy. Rome do come out on top. But it's a classic example of, play the game, don't play the rules, and it seemed to sort of work out in the end. But there are a few errors, so I won't detail it out too much. Suffice to say that the Libyans and one of the Carthaginian cavalry units do break and leave the board. Carthage, turn 4. Martin moves his right-hand Numidian light cavalry over the river. Yes, you heard it here, folks. He moves a unit across the river. Spurred on by his dice-rolling prowess, he then moves Another unit across the river, this time managing to get some Italians across the river. Not believing his luck, he then orders the rest of the division, including the war elephant, to cross the river.
Move a damn elephant!
He rolls the dice.
No.
We all watch with bated breath.
He's an 8, isn't he?
Embarrassed, we move on to the shooting phase, where Martin puts one wound on Chris's light cavalry on the left. He also puts another hit and a wound onto Chris's shaken principes in the centre, forcing a break test, which they roll low and break. Moving on to the close combat phase, we resolve the remainder of that rather messy combat in the middle of the table, with the net result being that Chris breaks from combat and Martin just says, "Nah, I'm loving it here. You lot, go away."
So, bottom of turn 4. How's it going for the Carthaginians?
Surprisingly brilliant. Obviously still with a large swathe of the army just having a fun time in the paddling pool, not getting involved, and some failed charges over on the far left. None of that matters because in the centre was some kind of unit breaking machine. Shaken and painfully battered troops are getting involved, crushing the centre line, destroying Chris's general's division and driving them back in the centre. For a return that started so horribly, things have kind of gone well.
So, Chris, how did the centre of the force fare in turn 4?
To start with, all right. But then, obviously, not so all right after that when the shaking unit of Phoenicians charged into my remaining unit there, and essentially that was a division broken. So it's my central division, my overall commander's division, just gonna get out the table. I've still got left and right flanks left, so I don't know really, just gonna have to pin those down and hope for the best.
So in terms of the actual historic battle, 100% correct then? The middle of the Roman army is falling back?
No, because the elephants moved.
So Scipio Senior potentially is going to get pretty wounded because he's got some cavalry heading towards him. So yeah, maybe he needs his son to save him.
Maybe we shall see in turn 5.
Rome, turn 5. Chris has to move his broken division back. He then charges with his cavalry against the Ligurians, and they evade successfully. Chris moves his left velites up into javelin range. He then charges in the centre against the Ligurians that have already just evaded. Now they can't evade again, so they have to stand and take the charge. Chris then tries to charge with his cavalry on the right, but he fails his order. In the shooting phase, Chris misses with his left-hand velites. He then shoots with his right-hand velites into the Gallic warband, inflicting 1 wound. In the close combat phase, Martin somehow manages to win the combat in the middle, only by 1, but this is mostly due to Chris rolling a spectacularly bad roll when his unit attacked.
It's 3 of the big dice.
Yeah.
So it's 4s on the big dice, 3s on the others.
Yeah. 1. Yeah, it is 1. Yeah. It's 1 on the 4 up. Chris then takes a break test and is forced to give ground. Carthage, turn 5. Martin then uses an initiative charge to make contact with his Numidian light cavalry into the rear of the Roman light cavalry. He then also using initiative moves both the Balearic slingers and initiative charges with his light cavalry on the right against Chris's light cavalry. Chris successfully countercharges and they meet at the bottom of the hill. Martin then sends a prayer up to the gods of Carthage and rolls the dice to see if he can move the rest of his right-hand division across the river. The gods intervene, and with the power of gravity, the dice fall in his favour.
If only a dice work. The kitchen.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
Okay, right. So,
Is it a 4 or is it a 2? Oh, only gravity can tell.
He then fails to charge with his Italians on the left, but does manage to get a charge against the central Principes with the Ligurian light infantry. He then moves his Gallic medium cavalry in to support the Ligurians. He then orders the Gallic warband into combat on the right hand side. Chris manages to evade with his Velites, but because Martin only rolled for one move, they fall short of just going into the unit behind. In the shooting phase, Martin misses with the bowmen. Both the Gallic warband and the Balearic slingers fire into the right hand maniple and manage to force a break test, which returns a disordered result on Chris's Hastati. Moving into the close combat phase, we first fight the cavalry fight at the bottom of the hill on the far right. This results with Martin winning by 2, and Chris has to take a break test and actually breaks from combat. Martin then sweeps with a sweeping advance into the maniple at the top of the hill, but unfortunately loses by 5, but rolls well and only has to give ground. Moving to the combat in the centre, Martin loses by 2, fails his break test and has to give ground. Chris's cavalry then loses to their rear charge, has to give ground but cannot due to the enemy proximity, so they're destroyed.
and that takes us to the end of the game, I guess.
It does.
Wow.
So today it wasn't to be for the Romans. It turned out to be quite historically accurate, in that Scipio the Elder ended up being in a bad spot, and his division broke and ran. Started out a little bit slow for the Romans, then it heated up a bit and things got a bit better, particularly in the centre, which is where a lot of the action was taking place. But then after that it just dwindled, and unfortunately the centre broke, and that spelt the end for the Romans. But thoroughly good game as ever, very swingy, quite back and forth, so yeah, really enjoyed it nonetheless.
So what a great game. Two final thoughts. Number one, Carthaginian victory, but that entirely to me felt like it came down to the dice just not rolling as Brook needed them to, which broke that centre division, which gave me the freedom to finally move over this river. However, as much as it was frustrating not getting all that stuff into the battle, once it did get there, it meant I had an entirely unscathed division wrapping round the flank. So pretty good all round. And I think the only thing I'd really change is on the left flank, I'd have been a lot more aggressive instead of trying to bait him off the hill. Overall though, first time I've played Hail Caesar, epic, and really enjoyed it. Intuitive system, fast, really fast. You've not got a lot of grinding. I didn't spend ages wheeling and faffing. The fight just happens, you're involved quickly. Really enjoyed it. Thanks very much. Well, it's been 4 hours for us and probably 20 to 25 minutes for you. That was Hail Caesar Epic, and we've been 3 men in a shed.
Yeah. And if you've enjoyed it, then please do subscribe, like, drop us any comments. If we've done anything wrong, then watch somebody else.
I'm almost certain we'll have done something wrong.
We've definitely done something wrong, probably.
And that'll be fine. We'll hear all about it in the comments. And I'll tell you the other thing as well. When you're either drunk or tired or whatever.
This one's actually rolling, by the way.
Good, listen to my advice. And you think, I could do with a kebab or a pizza. No, just throw loads of beige crap in your air fryer, get some chilli sauce and just have a great time.
Just wag it on, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
David and Goliath.
Shattered them.
I just want 20 bases of them.
Yeah.
Okay, that was great. Get in.